Hi there. I'm Dr. Kit Slies. I'm a psychologist and a life coach, and I'm here today because I want to inspire your confidence, your self-compassion, and your growth. And today I'm talking about relationships, specifically about self-sacrifice in the context of relationships. And I'm talking about really romantic relationships and friendships, family, that sort of thing. Sacrifice as a parent is sort of a different topic. So that's what I'm really talking about today is thinking of like maybe your significant other, if you have one, or some friendships that you have, family relationships. We're talking about sacrificing our own needs or wants or desires in a relationship for another person. And the reality is that there is a time to sacrifice ourselves in relationships. A little bit of sacrifice and negotiation is normal. But if you are doing it all the time and for the wrong reasons, that might be a sign the relationship is unhealthy, or even a sign that maybe you are emotionally codependent. And so, what is codependence? The term codependent, a lot of it has its roots in sort of this notion of somebody being addicted to a substance and a partner being, the two of you being codependent. Well, the primary person being dependent on a substance, and then the relationship sort of revolving around all the behaviors and aspects of that substance dependence that the other person, the partner, is would call as codependent. They're not, even though they're not using the substance, they're dependent with the other person on just the focus being on their use of the substance and all of the arguments and sort of journey that person is on with that substance. But in a more broad sense, the term codependence is really talking about when our emotions really depend on another person, whether it's their emotional state or something that they're saying or doing, versus being a completely individuated person, an individual with our own emotions that we can, yes, we might be happy or sad depending on what's going on with our partner, but our emotional state doesn't depend on the other person's full happiness or whatever that may be. So an example of this might be like if our partner is in a bad mood, then we are like feeling their bad mood as if it were our own bad mood. So that's codependence. And the reason why that's relevant is because when there is a degree of codependence, that's when we tend to see a lot of unhealthy self-sacrifice in the context of a relationship. Now, the two, you could be sacrificing yourself and not necessarily codependent, but we are going to talk a little bit about what codependence might look like in relation to self-sacrifice, and then some other questions to ask yourself about, are you over-sacrificing yourself in a relationship? So again, some sacrifice in a relationship is a normal, necessary part of relationships. And if you're not sacrificing or negotiating, maybe is a better word, your needs and thinking about your partner's needs sometimes more than your own needs a little bit, that might be an opportunity for some other introspective work. But today I'm really talking about folks who just overly sacrifice themselves and who feel exhausted at that self-sacrifice, or they feel like extreme guilt if they're not really sacrificing themselves all the time in the relationship. So some questions that you can ask yourself to find out if this is a sign of unhealthy self-sacrifice and if it's maybe a sign of codependence would be, do you sacrifice yourself to avoid conflict? So in other words, maybe there's a need that you have or a request that you have that you want to speak up about, but you don't because you are afraid that's going to cause conflict. Now, that could be a sign of codependence. That could be a sign of you two just have not figured out healthy communication strategies, because the reality is that some level of disagreement and working through differing viewpoints is also a normal, healthy part of a relationship. But if you are just going out of your way all the time to avoid conflict, you might want to ask yourself if there is some codependence there. Another question to ask yourself is, do you self-sacrifice your own needs, wants, desires, requests because you maybe feel less than and somehow depend a little bit on the recognition that you get from always martyring yourself, always sacrificing your needs? Oh, look at her, look at him, he's always putting everyone else's needs before their own. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, that feels good to hear that, maybe, but if you are depending on that kind of recognition, that might be a sign of codependence. Again, that is healthy in some level, but if you're doing it all the time and you feel like you need that recognition, we're looking at maybe a possibility of codependence there. If you are worried about what your partner will think of you, maybe you're worried that they'll leave you or they won't be your friend anymore if you don't sacrifice yourself, that could also be a sign of some codependence. If you feel like a bad person if you don't sacrifice yourself, that's another sign to do some introspection. So those are some questions to ask yourself around codependence specifically. Other things that you can evaluate and ask yourself as to whether or not it's healthy to sacrifice in that moment are some questions that I'm going to go over next. So the first thing you might want to ask yourself is, how big is the sacrifice that maybe your partner is asking you to make, if they're asking for a direct sacrifice, and how committed are you in the relationship? If it's a really big sacrifice and you're just starting out in the relationship or you don't feel super committed, that might be a sign that maybe that's not the best sacrifice to make. Now, if you're very, very, very committed and it is a bigger sacrifice, then that might be an opportunity for you to do some introspection and explore what that sacrifice would mean to you and the relationship. There's no clear-cut answer on this stuff, by the way, guys. These are all just questions for introspection here, okay? Another question that you can explore is, do you feel your partner would do a similar sacrifice for you? Now, I'm not asking you guys to keep score. This is not a one-to-one, oh, I sacrificed for you, so now it's your turn to sacrifice for me. That is also not a healthy thing to do in a relationship. That is a sure recipe for what we call a power struggle, which is typically when folks end up coming in for therapy, right? So, but it is a question, if you feel like your partner never, ever, ever makes any sacrifices for you and isn't willing to do so, the question I have for you is, how does that make you feel? And are you okay with that? I'll go into that a little bit more later. So in terms of the feelings, the next question that you might want to ask yourself is, if your partner is asking you to make a sacrifice, or maybe your friend, this could be a friendship, right? If they're asking you to make a sacrifice, do they acknowledge that and show appreciation, right? Or do they kind of just expect you to do it with no complaints or anything? I think it's important that if a sacrifice is being made, that you two everybody's acknowledging that this is a sacrifice and that it's a big thing to be doing, or maybe it's a small thing, okay, but just acknowledging that and showing appreciation is a healthy thing to have in a relationship, any kind of relationship. Another question to be looking at is your partner willing to negotiate or consider alternatives? So even if in the end you do end up making the sacrifice, can they show some good faith to kind of walk you through some alternatives together as a couple? Like, what are the alternatives that we can consider as this partnership? Can we at least try those on for size, or are they sort of expecting you to make this sacrifice with really no negotiation at all? Okay. Another question to be asking yourself, if you're finding yourself wanting to make the sacrifice, is, are you expecting a sacrifice in return from your partner? That goes back to that keeping score thing. That's just a big no. Please don't keep score. I mean, you do want things to feel balanced overall, but it shouldn't be, we're not keeping a tally book on that sort of thing. Okay. And then finally, you really want to ask yourself, Are you doing it for some of those kind of codependency reasons we discussed before, where you're sort of, really avoiding conflict and depending on the recognition and worried that your partner is going to leave you, those sorts of things? Or is your motivation for sacrifice, like, where is that coming from? Is it coming from a place of love and really wanting what's best for your partner and also for you and for the relationship as a whole? Because that's a very balanced, healthy thing, to be wanting what's best for everybody and seeing how maybe this sacrifice is going to help your partner. And maybe there's even some ways it will help you, or just by helping your partner, it helps you and the relationship as a whole. So remember, some sacrifice is healthy and normal. And if you answered any of these questions where you were maybe identifying with there's an aspect of codependency, or you're identifying that the sacrifice in the relationship feels unbalanced or some way, this is not the time to panic. This is simply just a time for you to do some introspection and to be gaining some clarity for yourself on what you want your relationships to look like. And so one of the ways that you can do that is consider how you feel in the relationship. What feelings do you feel in relation to your partner? And also ask yourself, in an ideal relationship, it's maybe an unattainable one, like a completely perfect relationship. How would you feel 100% of the time in that perfect relationship? Keeping in mind that that is maybe unattainable, but what you can do is you can use those emotions, those ideal emotions in the perfect or ideal relationship, as a guide of what you'd like to be feeling at least the majority of the time in your friendships, romantic relationships. And so you can do some introspection there. How do you feel most of the time with your partner, with your friends? Do you feel valued? Do you feel respected? Do you feel trusted and trusting? Do you feel safe? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel loved? What are some other feelings that you would like to feel in a relationship? And just do some introspection for yourself. Again, this is not the time to panic. You don't have to make any big decisions based on these feelings. Just pay attention to yourself over the days or weeks, months to come, how you're feeling in those relationships. And does that lead you to wanting to make requests, set boundaries, make changes to the relationships? Stay tuned in some of my future videos. I'm going to be talking about making requests and getting to know yourself, and how that can guide communication, using direct communication, using those I statements and expressing your needs in relationships. So I hope you found this video helpful today, and take care until next time. Bye.